answer questions. Or put it in the chat and I'll try and watch the chat too. And I think if Melissa, if you could help me with that also. So this session is data quality checks and balances. So thank you for being here. I'm assuming that most of you in here have are involved in the data realm somehow within your Migrant Ed programs. So first, a little bit about me as the presenter. My name is Danielle Waite. I am the Nebraska MEP State Data Coordinator, and I've been in that position for about 10 years. And I'm actually gonna stop my video because I'm gonna be using multiple screens, and Zoom is very awkward when I'm looking different ways and not directly at the camera. So I'm just gonna stop my video and we can just focus on the presentation. Okay, and I am part of some consortiums through the Nebraska MEP, where I represent the Nebraska MEP. I'm in the IDRC technical services team. I'm a member of also IMEC, Interstate Migrant Education Council. The state data system that we use in Nebraska is MIS 2000. A fun fact about me, I own a crazy amount of garden gnomes. And I wanted to share a fun fact about Nebraska. Alliance, Nebraska is home to the famous attraction Carhenge. Those of you that may not be familiar with Carhenge, it is a replica of Stonehenge that's made out of old cars. It was built in 1987 and it's on a field just outside of Alliance, Nebraska. So if you ever come through Nebraska, it's a kind of a big tourist attraction. It's in the picture you'll see, that's when I went to visit Alliance for some work with the Migrant Ed program, and we stopped out at Carhenge. So that's a picture of me at Carhenge. Okay, and so about the session, MEP data can be complicated. So in this session, we'll talk about ideas on how to ensure you have the right data quality checks and balances in place for the data for your MEP program. And with that, we'll talk about the Nebraska MEP. I'll give an introduction and kind of some interesting data within the Nebraska MEP. I'll be referencing throughout the presentation IDRC data resources that are available. We'll talk about M6 data requirements, some communication. I'll share many examples of communication that IDRC has available for examples of communication and things like that and references. Also just some things from Nebraska that I thought might be helpful to talk about. We'll talk about residency verification. And also we'll talk a little bit about the Consolidated State Performance Report and preparing for that. So a little bit about the Nebraska MEP. Here's just some data that I pulled. On this slide is data that I pulled from our state database, MIS 2000. So during the 2021 performance period, the Nebraska MEP reported a total of 4,051 eligible migratory children, ages 3 through 21, residing in the state. So you can kind of get an idea on how big our MEP program is compared to yours. You can see how our age ranges and grades, our population is divided up based on 2021 data. 34% of those children are PFS, identified PFS, 46% English learners, and 30% moved within the last 12 months. And this is information that was also sent in through our CSPR. During the 2021 performance period, eligible migratory families in Nebraska spoke 22 different home languages. And I put in bold the ones that were most common in the 2021 year, being the highest in Spanish, then 16% in English, and then Karen, Somali, and Karenni. This map shows where migratory families in Nebraska moved from. During the 2021 performance period, migratory children made 989 qualifying moves to or within Nebraska from 40 states and the District of Columbia. So many of you will probably see that we shared families in the past performance period. When we break down those moves into the top 5 states, the Nebraska children in Nebraska moved from. You'll see Nebraska's at the top, and those are just intrastate moves. And then with Texas, California, Iowa, and Colorado being in those top 5 students we share through the Migrant program. And then backing out further, during the 2021 performance period, migratory children made 313 qualifying moves to Nebraska from 12 countries outside of the US. And you can see a list of those countries there. And I've also got them highlighted on the map. And then taking a look at where families move to, I got this information from Move Notices report on M6. We'll talk about reports and things that can be useful on M6 and through your database. So this was the way I pulled that information. So by looking at that, I can see that the Nebraska MEP sent 277 M6 notices, informing 29 partner states that migratory children have moved to their state. And so this is just based on move notices. I know sometimes, families move and move notices aren't sent, whatever the case might be. So this is representative of the move notices sent in M6. Seeing that Texas was #1 for move notices that we sent that our families were moving to Texas. And then you'll also see Iowa, Kansas, Colorado, and California on that top 5. Okay, so as I reference the Migrant Ed program in Nebraska, I'll talk about communication and how we have some things organized. So I thought it would be interesting and helpful to share with you kind of how our state is organized in the MEP. We are organized into 5 regions: the Panhandle region, the East region, which kind of goes down through the middle and then to the east, the Northeast region in green, the Central region is in yellow, and the Southwest region is in pink. We are comprised of district projects, which are projects that that have grants just within their school district, and that's who they cover, that's who they serve and identify for Migrant Ed. And then we have regional projects who are in charge of basically their whole region in their area or specific pieces of that region within their area. So since we were talking about Carhenge and Alliance, Nebraska, you'll see that we have a district project. You'll see it in the list, Alliance, and it's over here. And Alliance is basically in charge of their district. There are a few exceptions just based on a couple of different things, but mostly just the Alliance area. And then you'll see in the regional projects list, you'll see ESU 13 located there. And so ESU 13 is in charge of IDNR services and data, everything for this whole Panhandle region, with the exception of Alliance's area, and they just cover their own district. And so that's true of, many of these projects. So let's see, another example would be within, let's see, the Northeast region, we just have ESU 1, and that's a regional project, and they're in charge of that whole area. So that's kind of how this map, things are organized. And then we have a state initiative project, ESU 9, which you'll see that they are a regional project, but then also they house state coordinators such as myself. So I work through ESU 9, and you'll see that through my contact information that I have a ESU 9 email address. Like I mentioned, I'll be referencing many of the data resources that IDRC has available. We have within our technical services team, we have a work group that solely does data reconciliation, comes up with resources for data reconciliation, and it's very data focused. So you can see our representatives, shout out to all of our IDRC TST team on the data reconciliation work group. You can see we have representatives from Ohio, Minnesota, New York, New Hampshire. I forgot to spell that out apparently in my slide, Iowa, Wisconsin, and I'm also on that team from Nebraska. And so with this team, we have put together resources for data staff, which is not something that IDRC had in the past focused so much on. And we realized there wasn't really a consortium or any type of national support for data staff. And so we thought this would be a good place for that. And that was the reason for developing this data reconciliation work group. So being a part of IDRC, and I'm losing track of how many years I've been a part of it. I've always appreciated putting input from my data realm into IDRC and into what that looks like for IDNR. But I'm very excited that we are taking this turn to really focus on data and putting together resources for data staff. So on the IDRC website, idr-consortium.net. I linked it here. And then please let me know if you can't see. I'm pretty sure you can see my whole screen here. Okay. So on the website, you'll see that if you scroll down into all of these, we have resources for data staff. They're designed to provide insight into needed data and processes. So if you click on that, you'll see some resources, and we're still developing more, but this is what we have so far. And I will reference these resources throughout the presentation today. Okay, so first we'll talk about required M6 data. Oops, sorry, I'm clicking around here. Okay, so minimum data elements, also referred to as MDEs, is data that the states must collect and maintain in their state migrant student databases in order to make those make data available to other states via M6. The most updated MDE list can be found under the resources tab in the M6 application. And that will talk about the definition of the minimum data elements, the accepted values for that data, for each data element, any additional information to further clarify the requirements for the MDE, and the MDE categories such as student demographics or course history and things like that. Data transmission from states migrant databases to M6 happens on agreed schedules through secure file transfer. You can see in this graphic kind of how that should look from state systems and into the M6 system. So per M6 regulations, states transmit those MDEs for any new migratory child identified or any child whose information has changed in the state's migrant database since the MDEs were last transmitted through M6. Data transmission from the state's migrant databases to M6 happens on agreed schedules through the secure file transfer. Okay, and so something really important to do in making sure that your data quality is up to date, that you're meeting the deadlines for these MDEs, whether it be the MDE deadlines or your local deadlines, setting deadlines for yourself and how it is based on your position with data. So creating a schedule is the first step. So you can review the M6 data collection deadlines. And if I click here, it'll take me to, oh, it's all the way down there. This is one of the documents that was developed by IDRC, and you can see it has this, the data transmission graphic here that I used in my slide, and it shows you where on M6 you can find some of these references, including the minimum data element list, if you're interested in looking at that. It kind of breaks things down. And then here it shows the timelines. It shows the timelines that M6 has. So taking a look at that, you can figure out what needs to be communicated or what needs to be on your schedule to make sure that whatever realm you have in data is aligning with making sure that these deadlines are being met. And you can read through this document and just kind of scrolling through so you can see what's in here. Also create a data plan and a calendar for when and from what resource this data should be collected. I did provide a few examples here. This is an example of an MDE collection creating on a spreadsheet, taking the MDE list. If you've looked at the MDE list, it looks just like this, but then also adding, you know, how is this data collected? Where should it be? And who collects this data? So this is something that one of our projects put together. And you can see, for example, if we're talking about the student name, where does that information come from? Well, for us, it comes first and foremost from the COE as the student is recruited. And when talking about who collects this data, the recruiter, verified by the review team, ongoing verification by additional MEP staff. And so that just kind of lays out how all of these MDEs are collected. Look for another example here. A lot of that stuff is recruiter. Let's see, like the student's grade, that is not collected until the COE is approved. And there's for this particular project, they use a grade form to estimate the grade until the grade can be confirmed by the school. So they have to use that resource, and that's done by the data specialist that's assigned to that area. So that's just an example of a way that you can kind of organize, make sure that each one of these data elements is being collected and that everybody knows who's responsible. Another example of this organization, here's a new COE process form, and this was developed by the same project. Kind of shout out to ESU 9, I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry, I see this is a little small. Let's see. Oh, I bet that that data spreadsheet was a little
If you
small.
go to the bottom, I mean to the top where it says view, and you see the 100%, you can make that 150 or yes, there you go.
There, that's better. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is an example of a form that was developed so that all of these, you know, the checks and balances can be done as a new COE is approved. You know, what happens next? So for this particular form, they, you know, put the parent guardian names, the service provider for the area, the date of the initial contact. And then there's instructions here, making sure that everything is secure, what, you know, who gets that email. And it's just, you know, it's a written process for organization. And then they can keep track of all the things that they need to do in the database, making sure the school history line is entered, school, any needs, you know, then as they're looking up all that information, they can put that all here, and then some information they need to collect. I know we all collect that stuff in different ways. In Nebraska, we have a little bit more of a challenge. We have to coordinate with our schools and find contacts within the school system to get a lot of this information, because we don't quite yet have the access to that information from our state database, which is a challenge, but hopefully in the future, everyone cross your fingers for us. But this is just one way that that a project has created a form to organize that. Let's see. I put this in here. I liked when I asked for examples. I came across this one. This is an example of a service map for project staff. This was developed by a Nebraska project. And this is just, I don't even think it's, I call it a draft because I don't think it's complete, but I thought it would be helpful to share, just because it's just a map that shows how services are going to be delivered and what everybody's role in that is. So for example, the recruiter submits the COE and is responsible for a verification process, checking the daily monitoring log. The data specialist has the responsibility of running the report daily to see who is newly approved, and then sending all sorts of letters, notifying the rest of the staff, sending a letter to the school to request information. I see they put a timeline in there with, you know, they have a 5-day timeline is what they have set for their deadline to do this. When to send the welcome letters, when to enter history lines. And then there's in blue all of the things that the coordinator for that project will need to do. And then the service provider, you know, when's the first point of contact? What do they bring with them, and all of this stuff. And so this was the product of, you know, all of these entities getting together and deciding how are we going to meet these deadlines and qualifications for the new migrant families. And a lot of that has to do with the data specialist and the communication that the data specialist is doing, especially with that initial notification of, hey, there's a new COE with a new family. And so, like, as I mentioned, that communication is extremely important. And as we go through this, we'll talk about different ways that different entities that we have communication with and what we use for that communication. So starting with schools specifically, and like I mentioned, Nebraska has to have really good communication with the schools because we have limited access to things through our state database. So they are actually the hub for you know, all of the things that we need to put in, like course history information, assessment information, those MDEs that we have to get. We have to have really good communication with schools. So building relationships with the school is important. And like I said, whether you have access to that pertinent information through a database, or whether you're just keeping in touch with the schools regarding what students are in and out of the school that are eligible for the migrant program, building those relationships is key, and finding out who at each of those schools is the person that you need to talk to, and then keeping maybe a spreadsheet or keeping track of those people, and as there is turnover, building those relationships. We mentioned school letters, and with that, there are some example letters through the IDRC on that data page, and I'll just click here. I don't know why it doesn't ever. Let's see. Okay, so in the residency verification, you'll see that there are data verification letters from different sources. New York, I'll click on that one. There's a student data verification letter. And just a letter that they send to their district superintendents to communicate with the school on student data verification. They use this through their verification process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I won't read through these, but I just wanted to mention them. There are different forms that can be, oh, thank you. And Melissa's putting those links in the chat. I appreciate that. And then there are forms that you can create or utilize. And as I mentioned before, that the other form that I showed you, for example, of the one that what needs to be collected when and from where, and that was created. MEP awareness, a big challenge for Nebraska is everybody that we need to communicate to and build these relationships with. Not everybody has heard of the migrant education program, and especially since we rely on them to collect student data, we have to really make sure that they know who we are affiliated with, and that it's okay to give us that information. So being involved, whether you're in a local area project or a district, making sure that you're involved in conversations, or you know, whether it's conferences or having a table at certain community events that are or school events, just so that you have that information, people know who you are, who the migrant education program is. When you're building these relationships, talking about how we can help each other, what can you do for the school? What will your part be? Why would it be good for the school or the school secretary to have a relationship with you? And how will that help the students and things that they need to do on their end? So kind of just discussing how you can help each other, how you can benefit each other through that relationship. Keeping facility info up to date. On the MDE list, you'll notice that you have to have information like the correct facility name, the correct code that goes along with that facility, and things are ever changing. The correct addresses, phone numbers, principals, things like that, making sure that all that information is up to date, and that that communication through your schools can be one way to keep that information up to date or to find out that something is going to change. And then of course, M6, keeping the school aware of M6 and what it is, and that we have access to information and how we share it, and also the requirements that we have to make sure that our data is up to date for M6. M6 provides fact sheets, and two really good fact sheets that would be good for this situation would be for an advocate or a counselor. So I'll click on here. And this is a resource that you can print from M6 in their resources list, but it has different things that, like positives, that M6 has for somebody who's an advocate or liaison. It has a little flow chart here. So for example, this says, it's July, your state user administrator receives a move notification in M6 and forwards it to you. The notification lets you know that Luisa Valdez will arrive in your district. Then before she arrives, you can log into M6 and see that Luisa has an individualized education plan, or IEP. You contact Luisa's previous school and request her IEP. And by having this information, even before Luisa arrives, you're able to ensure that she will get the services that she needs. So just giving this information, and then, obviously talking about it and adapting it to the actual situation and who has access to M6, but just letting them know the benefits of that. There's also one here, same kind of information, but for a counselor. And I won't click on that one, but that one is also available on M6. M6 also has M6 FERPA and exceptions and MDEs. This is on the resources page also. The reason I included this was we recently had a school that was really reluctant to work with the Migrant Ed program, and was just, for good reason, making sure that they weren't giving out personally identifiable information to people they weren't supposed to. So we were able to use this letter, and you'll see that they even highlighted this paragraph here so that we can validate who the migrant education program is and that it is okay. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure.
On the bottom, you have the options,
It's right there. I'm so
yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
No problem. Just every time you open a screen, it's kind of small.
Very small.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, you can see here, just tells you kind of, who we are, all the legalities, and it was a really good solution. And ultimately, then we were able to have that relationship with that school. It was a school that had never had a migratory family before in their area, or at least not in the recent, in any recent time that anybody had to work with the Migrant Ed program. So just using these resources for communication is huge. Something else that we have developed so that to kind of battle that same type of scenario is we had our Nebraska Department of Education, the director put together this letter of notification, and I will zoom in with my new superpower here. Okay. But it has, from the Department of Education, and then explaining what the Title I-C migrant education program is. And a lot of the information is the same as that other letter. And I'm pretty sure if I highlighted that, it would be the same if I compared them from the two letters. But just having that information, and then having, this is our state director, Sue Henry, signing off on that, and having the NDE administrator, federal programs signature on there, just having that available to use has been very helpful in many of similar situations, and making sure we can build those partnerships. Okay, so we talked about communication with schools. Now, communication with families. Whoops, and then of course I'm clicking on things that are invisible. Okay, so data verification is communication that can be done with families. Residency verification, or just, you know, the spelling that can be done at the time of COE spelling, states, things like that. If you know, you notice a mistake on something that has come through with data, you're not quite sure, you can reach out to the families and have that be verified. Verifying student needs, having the service providers or liaisons, whoever is working with the families, communicating those needs, and in turn, you know, using those needs for your state's at-risk documentation. Communicating through letters is important. In Nebraska, you know, I showed you we had all these different languages for home languages that our families speak, and having letters and things like that translated into the family's home language is key, and making sure we have that open communication. Here's an example of a certification of eligibility letter. It's kind of like a letter, and I will zoom in. A letter that for a family that it's newly eligible. This is for the parent or guardian after they have been approved for the program. And then talking about the benefits of the migrant education program, and the services that are available through the program, and knowing how they can reach out. And then they have a place here for the direct contact, the person that they would need to start that relationship. And so the families know who to reach out to once they are eligible. Another one is end of eligibility, and this is great for, you know, obviously communication with the families that their eligibility will be ending, but then also that follow-up, finding out if the, you know, families are eligible for, you know, did they have another move that we weren't aware of, things like that. And like I said, I'm picking on the project ESU9 because I went through their information. I learned a new skill today too. Look at this. But yep, just letting the families know when their eligibility is coming to an end. And for a data specialist or somebody in the data realm, that might mean keeping track using reports and things like that. So this is an example of a letter that is sent during that time. And I keep clicking on things I'm not ready for. Talking with families about student coursework. Communicating with families about mobility. And then the MEP referral system. I don't know if everybody's familiar, but there is a referral system that families can use, or anybody can use, to refer families to the migrant education program. And I won't click through it, but there's a link there for the referral system. And just sharing that with families. And then M6, the fact sheet that I mentioned earlier, there's one for parents and how M6 benefits families directly from a parent's perspective. And then communication with staff is the other communication piece I have in here. So M6, inter and interstate coordination and user responsibilities, making sure M6 is set up in a way that benefits everybody, and that work list items such as move notices, data requests and things like that are going to the correct roles, the correct users. In Nebraska, we have that organized by, like I mentioned, every project. There's either a regional project or a district project. Within each project, there's a data specialist for those projects. And in Nebraska, when move notices are sent, I have it organized so that move notices for specific facilities will go directly to the data specialist in that area. And I know there are many ways to do that, but just having a good plan and communicating that plan so everybody knows their role within M6 is just a really great tool and a really secure way to send information and communicate about your students. IDRC has a move notice process document. So I'll click on that and I will not zoom into it there, but somewhere. Oh, right here. All right, so we have a move notice process document, and it talks about what to do when you're receiving a move notice, and just anything that we thought would be beneficial in using move notices through M6. And so we just kind of talked about, between everybody in the consortium, how we use M6 for move notices and our protocols, and we just, put together some best practices. So that's something that you can reference. Data updates, changes of addresses, phone numbers, things that need to go in the data system, any updates with coursework, or you can get that information through staff that works directly with the family, depending on what that is. So making sure you have a good channel for that data. In Nebraska, we have what we call a change of data form. If something needs to be changed and it needs to go, like on a COE, we find an error or something with a name or birth date or something that wasn't caught before, we have a change of data form to put in that request. I do want to change this to a different, I don't know, something different that we can utilize in the same way. But for now, this is an example of what we have as a form that staff can fill out to request changes, and it goes through an approval process. So just putting, the student information in here, what the old data is and what data we want to be changed. So it's just something we have, and everybody within the state can use that. And there's, a couple different ways that they choose to use it, but just having that developed has been really helpful. So it doesn't come in the form of an email, it's secure, we have a process. Distribute reports regularly. Train staff who has access to reports, whether it's through M6 or through your local database, to run useful reports. Finding out what student needs are through staff that works directly with the students, and making sure that's updated in your data system accordingly. Service tracking. So part of keeping track of services and what the MEP is providing, and making sure that that is accurate so that we can report it properly. Having a form of some type to help you organize that and get it into the database. So this is an example of our service log. So when a service provider goes into the to work with a student, then they can write down the date, the student's name and or ID, depending on how this form will be shared securely, of course. And then these are codes for all of the services that we have available in our data system, instructional services and support services. And then they code that and give it to their data specialist. So having this form is a great way of communication. For example, there were some projects that, we're kind of using this form as an optional form. Sometimes they'd get, a student ID and then an email, or, this is printed and put on somebody's desk, or, whatever that might be. And just through emphasizing and training, improving that communication so that things can be organized and information can get in MIS 2000. We've seen a lot of use out of this form, and a lot of improvement in our, making sure that our services are put in the data system correctly and in a timely fashion. Making sure you have specific security processes in place. As I'm showing you these forms, you should be sure that when you're sending the forms that you're, you have secure ways to send said forms, or information about students. Be aware of personally identifiable information. Make sure that, if there are staff sending things to you, or you're sending things out, that it's done with your encrypting or using something secure, so that our family's information is being protected. And then finally, expressing your needs and expectations, reevaluating this organization often is important, and just making sure that it works for everybody and checking on that flow and the communication, and making sure that everything is running smoothly. Okay. So then I'm going to transition into talking about reports. So first of all, figuring out what reports are useful for you in your local database. We have what's called an accepted COE report. This was when we transitioned from paper COEs to the electronic COE years ago. MS Ed put this together for us in MIS 2000, an accepted COE report, so that we could run it daily and see which COEs have been recently approved by the SEA. And then, that COE process form, I think I had it linked here, but just referencing that again, that I showed you earlier, that form that's put together, after the data specialist runs this accepted COE report and finds out which students are new to the program, then, what comes next? What happened? How's that flow chart go? We have a COE status report that shows not only newly accepted COEs, but what COEs are within the review process. In Nebraska, we have the COE being reviewed by 3 of the state coordinators. I'm the first reviewer in our state, but it goes through me. It goes through our quality control coordinator, and then through our IDNR coordinator, who signs off on it completely. So by running a COE status report, they can see, each project can see the status of COEs that are new and that are in that process, so they know who to expect and what to watch for. We have reports that show us our child count, which services they're receiving, any priority for service data, the end of student eligibility, which students are going to be turning 3, and then summarizing their enroll, withdraw, and move dates. And so for us, we have a report. I called the student summary report, and I think its nickname is the super awesome report. But we have a report that just kind of basically summarizes all of that and more. So I'm going to share that with you. And this has been just developed through with MIS 2000 with the help of MS Ed, and their technical support has been great with this. So this is just an example of everything that we have in this report. And I'm going to zoom in so we can see. But it's I usually manipulate through Excel, but just for these purposes, I have it in Google Sheets. But we know which student is in which which project within Nebraska, what school they go to, the code for that school, which city the school is in, their ID within the database, the state ID that they use for school when they go to a Nebraska school, their M6 ID, so we can easily look them up in M6. We have their student's name, date of birth, the race code. I use that for CSPR purposes. I actually use this report for CSPR purposes so that it's consistent. We're running this report for quality control or for verifying students, and then when we turn in our numbers for the state performance report. Which age grade group, and this actually, it aligns properly with CSPR. The student's grade that they're put in MIS 2000. And then their enroll and withdraw information. If they have, for example, if the student has moved and what date that happened, or if they've graduated, stuff like that is there. Residency verification, when the child was last verified, when their residency was last verified, is there. M6 term date. So our data specialists will often use this report and use this M6 term date. They'll sort and figure out or highlight the most, the M6 term date when the student's eligibility is going to be expiring. And we'll send this information to either like recruiters or service providers or somebody to follow up with that family. I think, as I mentioned, there's some projects use a letter saying, hey, your eligibility is going to be ending, but then also it's important to make sure to touch base with that family and make sure that they haven't had any other moves that we weren't aware of, maybe over a summer or season or whatever the case might be. So we're just re-interviewing that family to make sure that they aren't eligible to have a newer QAD. Algebra 1, if immunization records availability, their ID for their COE within MIS 2000, their qualifying arrival date, the name of their employers. There's employer information in case that's something that, especially through IDNR, having this information is really helpful, and you can notice trends when you're, run these reports and look and see what employers in which cities, and even comparing to their qualifying arrival date and those employers, you can use that to help with IDNR. Qualifying activity, how they were, the activity that they were doing that qualified for the Migrant Ed program. And then these are our student needs. So the at-risk that we have in Nebraska. So we have, if there's a yes, that means that they were just marked for that at-risk. If they have a QAD within the performance period. So if they've had a qualifying move within the last 12 months, that is something that we need for CSPR. And it's also good to know for PFS purposes. If they're priority for service, it's marked there, so we can see who our priority students are. We can see which students have been served, especially when we're looking at those who are priority for service. You might look and see how many of those students are marked yes with priority for service who have not been served, and communicate that with the service providers. Have they been served with instruction or support services? And then these are just our service codes, so you can see which services exactly each student has received. I have a lot of them here. And then parent guardian information, the language the family speaks, and then their address and phone number information, just their contact information, so you can use to send letters, things like that. So this report has a lot of information in it. We don't, some projects will cut it down and print it for different purposes, but we have staff that run this report for their recruiters or service providers, and they look at this information monthly. It helps them to make sure that their data is correct, as well as, gives insight into, what next steps should be for service providers and for recruiters based on, family needs and their eligibility. And then switching to talk about useful reports within MIS 2000. I like this graphic because this lady here just is really surprised at all the useful reports that are on M6. I think I said MIS 2000, I meant M6. So these reports are available on M6, and I didn't list all the reports, but just I want to talk a little bit about the sections of reports available. And if you have access to M6, you can go in and see what reports are available. Reports in M6 will provide information for MEP planning, data analysis, compliance with the MEP and M6 regulations. The list of reports available, it'll depend on your user access role within M6. And the reports are organized into 7 different sections. First, you'll have the dashboard section. They display charts containing data about key topics to help you make decisions about your migrant education program, manage your data in M6, and understand how users in your state are using M6. So that's, as an admin role also is very important. Then student information. There are reports that display data that are made available for exchange among states, including the student count, M6 child count, demographics, enrollment details, course history, and assessments. In M6, your role might involve that you have work lists. And so there are reports that display data on your work list items, including items that need to be worked on. Whether it's, merges and splits for student records, user move notifications, data requests, things like that. There's data quality reports. They help state and regional data administrators verify data quality compliance levels by showing recent files submitted by states and displaying student records that contain incomplete or invalid data, potential duplicates, and data logic issues. Child count reconciliation. There are reports that help identify data quality issues in student records that may cause differences in child counts between M6 and your state system. These are very important to run throughout the year to make sure that your data within your state system is lining up correctly with the M6 requirements. There are reports on student mobility. They display data on children moving from to and from different states. That's where I got some of that information that I shared at the beginning when I was sharing Nebraska information. You can use these reports to analyze patterns, different plans for IDNR efforts. And then those who have administrative role, there's reports that will take a look at user accounts. There's an account list report. It displays profile information for M6 users within your state, their roles, their contact details, to facilitate accounts management and periodic reviews of users' accounts. Make sure you have that organized. And then looking at the residency verification process. Within, and I'm not going to go through all these steps in detail, but I just wanted to make sure that you know that we have the residency verification process available step by step through IDRC. We've created a form about residency verification processes and how to go, the best ways to go about verifying the student residency. So then step 1, ensuring all staff are aware of the residency verification process. We have examples of, like I mentioned before, there's examples of letters that's used for that and protocol. Developing your student list. There's examples here of mapping out your student list and that process. mapping out the process and organizing your list by areas and locations, determining who was going to complete those. We have a sample report here, and then breaking it down into whether you're in a large state, medium state, small state. It's been really great having these conversations with a variety of different states to create this document, because we are able to hone in on the needs that states with all different kinds of situations, and how those documents can be helpful to all states and not just states that reflect, one or two states in what they look like for the MEP and their size and how they do things. Step 4, creating your data collection document resource. There's a sample report here that you can click on to see what's sent out to district staff. And then step 5, recording your data and making sure that that data is showing up correctly in M6. So like I said, I wasn't going to go through completely, but this is something that you can read and go through to make sure that you are, when you're doing your data or your residency verification, that you are following best practices, or it might give you new ideas to reorganize that.
Danielle?
Yes.
We still have, we only have 3 minutes left.
3 minutes.
Yes. So
Okay.
if you want to take questions at this time, or
Sure.
let me know. Yeah, you let me
Sure.
know.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a lot of information here. Okay, so then, and I kind of mentioned CSPR throughout, and just making sure that, you're continuing quality control throughout the year. If there's something that, if you're involved with CSPR and running those reports or entering data that's used there. So there's a lot of that information too within IDRC, and there's a link there also. So just make sure you explore that. But yeah, like Melissa had mentioned, we only have a couple minutes left. So are there any questions or comments? I know this is a lot of information.
And if you would like to unmute yourself, you're welcome to do that at this time, or you can put your question on the chat box. Because there's no questions.
All right.
You
okay.
gave us a lot of information.
I know it. I'm really excited about all the information and the conversations we've been having through the IDRC data reconciliation work group. So I guess just go through all that information that I referenced on the website. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. My email address is right there. And then also anyone else within that IDRC data reconciliation group has just a whole bunch of information, and you can really drill down on what other states do too. So thank you all. I really appreciate you coming and talking data with me, and have fun at the rest of your sessions today.
Thank you, Danielle, so much for your time. And just so everybody knows, the next sessions are difficult eligibility scenarios by Bruce Lack, or mental and emotional resiliency, a needed ingredient in our work with MEP by Jessica Castañeda. Both of those start at 1:30 Central Standard Time. So you have a little time in between if you want to join those. And thank you again for participating. We're so thankful you're here. You have a good evening. I'll see you again later.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.